The blue arc on the first page gives him away. It curves beside Colin Mercer's thumb as he places my training manual beneath the document camera. I made that mark at 4:13 this morning when the printer jammed and I tested my China marker on the only clean copy. At the client review, Colin says, I'm proud to present the training program I built from the ground up. 46 evaluators sit behind the U-shaped tables when the operations director asks who developed the troubleshooting exercises. Colin gestures toward my chair against the wall. Mara's the girl who helped with slides. Then Dr. Helen Cho, the lead evaluator, opens a bound stack of 46 forms. She looks past him. Mara Vance. My name sounds different in her voice, heavy enough to set on a table. She turns the stack so the consortium directors can see the handwritten instructor field. Every evaluator identified Ms. Vance as the instructor. Colin's hand comes down over my blue mark. Helen asked me to join them at the table. I don't move. 7 months earlier, Colin had stood in the doorway of our training bay holding a paper cup of coffee and watching me ruin a pump on purpose. The pump was already dead. Its motor had burned out at a resort laundry outside Richmond, and Tessa Grant had brought it back because she believed every failed machine deserved an autopsy. I had mounted it on a waist-high demonstration frame beside a chemical feed manifold, 3 clear hoses, and a row of plastic valves. A laminated diagram hung from 2 binder clips above it. Using my blue China marker, I circled the closed discharge valve. What happens if I start it now? I asked. The 6 service technicians around the frame leaned closer. They had all worked in commercial laundries long enough to distrust simple questions. Overpressure alarm, Dennis said. If the alarm works, Tessa added. Tessa had gray threaded through her black braid and the cheerful manners of someone who kept bolt cutters in her truck. She reached around Dennis and tapped the coupling. That'll go first. 20 says the hose jumps, another technician said. You're wagering on equipment in a safety class? I asked. It's decommissioned equipment. That makes it wholesome? Colin laughed from the doorway. Everyone turned. He was new enough that his shirt still had fold lines from the store. Pale blue, white collar, dark trousers with a sharp crease. He'd been introduced that morning as the new director of client development and training, a title broad enough to cover every problem Calder Process Services hadn't solved. Don't let me interrupt, he said. You're standing in front of the emergency shutoff, Tessa told him. He looked over his shoulder, saw the red switch, and moved immediately. I noticed that. Plenty of executives would have made a joke and stayed where they were. I started the pump. The coupling knocked twice. The clear hose snapped against the frame hard enough to make Dennis spill coffee down his sleeve. Tessa reached for the switch, but I killed the power first. 8 seconds, I said. That's how long the controller gives you before shutdown if the sensor is clean. Last month, how many of you found sensors coated with softener residue? 5 hands rose. Dennis was wiping his sleeve with an attendance sheet. 6, he said. I found one on Tuesday. I wiped the blue circle from the diagram with a square of felt. A pale shadow remained where the marker had been. Then 8 seconds is a wish. Let's isolate the line correctly. Colin stayed for the full hour. He asked useful questions. How often did clients request practical instruction? What failures cost the most downtime? Could supervisors take the course without a maintenance background? He even waited until the technicians left before asking whether the jumping hose was safe. Safe enough for people who follow instructions, I said, and for people who don't? That's who training is for. Tessa barked a laugh from inside the equipment cabinet. Colin walked around the demonstration frame. He didn't touch anything. Who designed this? I did. The company has a formal course built around it? The company has a PowerPoint from 2014 with a cartoon padlock on slide 12. Ah. The lock is smiling, Tessa called. It is, I said. That's how you know it's safe. Colin grinned, then studied the diagram more closely. Could you build something formal? I capped the China marker. Formal for whom? That question pleased him. I could see it. He pulled a folding chair away from the wall and sat backward on it, forearms resting across the back. Hospital laundries, regional operations groups. They're getting hammered on labor turnover, chemical costs, safety incidents. Most vendors send a rep to point at a control panel and call it training. You used to work for a vendor, Tessa said, which is how I know. He said it without flinching. That pleased me. Calder had been losing service contracts for 2 years. Our technicians could rebuild steam valves in rooms hot enough to blur your vision, but the sales department treated training as a free lunch attached to equipment installation. Colin wanted to sell it as its own service. What would you need? He asked me. Time. He nodded. Equipment. Another nod. Access to failure reports, a client site willing to let us observe full shifts, Tessa for practical testing. Tessa appeared from behind the cabinet with a wrench in one hand. Tessa has work. I'll need her for 2 hours a week. 4, she said. Colin pointed at her. I like a realistic negotiator. You haven't heard my rate. He laughed again, but he wrote down 4. That afternoon, he sent an email assigning me 16 development hours a week for 6 weeks. He copied my manager, payroll, Tessa, and the branch vice president. I printed it because promises look different on paper. At the top, in the blank space beside the Calder logo, I wrote pilot authorization with my blue marker and drew a box around the 16. My father had taught me to mark the thing that mattered. Leon Vance had spent 38 years in a machine shop where everything was loud enough to make language optional. When I was younger, he would come home with silver dust in the lines of his hands and a china marker tucked above his ear. He marked steel before cutting it. He marked grocery coupons after my mother died. He marked the fuse box in his apartment because the landlord's labels were wrong. At 71, he had retired from machinery and devoted himself to correcting game show contestants from a brown recliner. I brought him dinner that Sunday and found 3 blue markers aligned on his kitchen table. You buying office supplies in bulk now? I asked. They discontinued the good ones at Harper Tool. They changed the wrapper. The new wrapper is slippery. You hold the marker, Dad. You don't marry it. He picked one up and drew a clean line across the back of an electric bill. This is wax density. I'm sorry I mocked your grief. You should be. His apartment smelled like onions, machine oil, and the cedar blocks he put in every closet. Since my mother's death, he cooked as though seasoning were a form of disloyalty. I had brought chicken stew. He added pepper while pretending I wasn't looking. He asked about the new director. Competent, I said. That sounded painful. It's inconvenient. I was prepared to dislike him. What's he want? A training program for hospital laundries. What do you get? 6 weeks off the emergency rotation, development hours. If they sell the pilot, I teach it. He looked at me over his glasses. In writing? I told him about the email. That says you get hours. Does it say whose program? It's company work. I didn't ask whose property. I asked whose program. Leon could turn one missing word into a loose stair tread. Once he noticed it, I felt it under my foot every time. He needs me, I said. Everybody needs a machinist until the machine runs. I'm not a machinist. He held out one of the blue markers. That's exactly the kind of technical distinction that gets a person robbed. I took it because arguing would have kept me there through the weather report. The next morning, I began with Calder's service archive. Commercial laundry failure reports were written by technicians at the end of shifts that often started before dawn. The useful facts hid between misspellings, irritation, and the phrases office people used when they wanted field people to sound tidy. Unit stopped became pump cavitated after operator reopened return valve out of sequence. Chemical odor became night supervisor bypassed cracked feed line with tape. User error covered everything from a distracted operator to an unreadable label. I built the course around sequences rather than rules. A rule could be memorized and ignored. A sequence made the machine tell you what would happen next. Tessa found me at my desk with 37 reports spread across the floor. You have chairs, she said. The floor is chronological. The floor is filthy. That helps with authenticity. She set down 2 coffees and stepped carefully between the papers. Colin wants pictures of the demo frame. He can come downstairs. He wants clean pictures. It is clean. He means pictures without Dennis in the background eating yogurt. That's discrimination against the arts. We spent the afternoon rebuilding the frame. Tessa replaced the cloudy hose with clear tubing and mounted 2 damaged couplings beside a new one, so trainees could compare wear patterns. I made laminated valve tags large enough to read through safety glasses. On each diagram, I left a white rectangle at the top. Instructor. Tessa watched me letter the first one. Since when do diagrams need an instructor's name? Since my father discovered a conspiracy in a missing noun. Leon's usually right. I know, it's exhausting. Colin arrived at 5 carrying sandwiches and a photographer's light kit. He had remembered Tessa was vegetarian and that I hated mayonnaise. Competence again, bright and irritating. He helped move the frame away from the scratched wall. When one wheel caught in a floor drain, he put down his jacket, crouched, and lifted with us. His expensive shirt pulled loose at the waist. My board presentation is Wednesday, he said. I want to show them this is real. It will be real after someone learns from it, I said. And nobody learns from it if I can't fund the pilot. Tessa looked at me over the frame. Point to Mercer. We staged the equipment under the lights. Colin asked me to stand beside it for scale, then checked the photograph and said, "You look like you're waiting to identify a body." I've seen what people do to pumps. Try looking optimistic. This is optimistic. He showed me the picture. My arms were folded, my mouth straight, the blue marker in my right hand like a tiny baton. Tessa stood behind the frame, grinning openly. Use the one with Tessa, I said. I'm using both. They need to see the expertise behind it. I believed him. By the end of the 6th week, the program had 4 modules, 3 tabletop failures, 1 live isolation drill, and a 52-page manual. Colin sold a 3-session pilot to the Mid-Atlantic Hospital Laundry Consortium before I finished correcting the page numbers. The first session took place at Bellwether Linen Services, where 11 hospitals sent sheets, surgical towels, gowns, and privacy curtains through a building that shook gently from 5 in the morning until midnight. The air carried bleach, hot cotton, and the metallic breath of steam. Omar Bell met us on the loading dock. He was a broad man with immaculate boots and a habit of pausing before he spoke, as if rejecting several less useful sentences. "You Mara?" he asked. "Yes." He looked at my tool case, then at Colin's leather portfolio. "Good." Colin smiled. "I'm Colin Mercer. I coordinated the pilot." Omar shook his hand. "Conference room's this way." The room held 16 supervisors and maintenance leads, 3 more than the roster. Colin gave the polished opening. He knew the consortium's injury numbers, their average downtime, and the exact cost of sending wet linen to a competitor during a line stoppage. People put down their phones. Then he turned to me. "Mara Vance has spent 16 years solving the failures this course is designed to prevent." It was the introduction I would remember later, because it proved he had always known exactly what my name was worth. I uncapped my blue marker and wrote it in the white rectangle above the first diagram. At lunch, Omar found me beside the demonstration frame. "You built this?" he asked. "With Tessa Grant." He nodded toward the evaluation forms Colin had placed near the door. The top line asked for facility, role, and instructor. Mercer says he built the program. He sold it. That wasn't my question. Across the room, Colin was making 3 operations directors laugh. He caught my eye and lifted his coffee cup in a small salute. I looked back at the blue letters of my name. "I built the instruction," I said. Omar took a form from the stack, found the instructor line, and wrote slowly enough to press through the paper. "Mara Vance," he said. "Spell it with 1 R?" "Yes." "Good. I hate correcting ink." He didn't have to correct it. By 4 o'clock, all 16 participants had run the isolation sequence. 2 had caught faults I hadn't expected them to notice. a backwards check valve, and a hairline crack near the chemical inlet. Dennis's old yogurt spoon, sterilized and repurposed, became an excellent pointer for showing the crack without putting fingers near the line. During the last exercise, I gave each table the same symptoms and different equipment histories. One group decided the controller was bad. Another wanted to replace the pump. Omar's group ignored the screen, traced the hoses, and found the blocked return. "That seems unfair," a supervisor named Gloria said. "They have Omar." "You have eyes," Omar told her. "You hide yours behind those safety glasses." Still working. I waited until the laughter settled. If 3 teams see the same alarm and only one asks what happened before the alarm, what does that tell us? "That we're replacing too many pumps," Gloria said, "and blaming too many controllers," someone else added. Omar leaned back in his chair. "Tells us history is a tool." That sentence ended up in my revision notes. It was cleaner than anything I had written. Colin collected the evaluation forms while Tessa and I drained the demonstration hoses into a gray utility bucket. He flipped through them near the coffee urn, his expression controlled but pleased. "How bad?" I asked. 4.8 average. Out of 10? 5. He held up the pages. 3 people asked for an advanced module. 6 want this at their own facilities. Helen Cho called it the most useful pilot the consortium has tested in 2 years. "Who's Helen Cho?" Tessa asked. "Quality director. She designed the review process." Omar, winding an extension cord beside us, said, "She eats weak programs." Colin tapped the stack against his palm. Today she asked for seconds. He bought dinner on the drive back. We sat in a booth at a place attached to a gas station, eating sandwiches under a television showing a silent weather map. Colin loosened his tie and talked about packaging the course in 2-day and 3-day versions. "We should keep the first one to a single day," I said. "They need time to try the sequence at work before we give them advanced diagnostics. Clients like comprehensive, clients like useful, clients also like getting travel approved once." Tessa pointed a French fry at him. "She's right. I'm hearing 2 against 1. You're hearing people who taught today." His smile tightened for half a second, then returned. "Fair. Single day follow-up workshop after 30 days. That was one of Colin's best qualities. When an idea survived contact with him, he could make it sound better than the person who brought it. By the time we reached Calder, he had outlined a follow-up package with site-specific failure data and supervisor coaching. I added a competency check. Tessa added a warning that any client who expected her to carry the demonstration frame upstairs would be charged by the step. At my desk the next morning, I opened the slide deck to enter the pilot results. The title page had changed. Calder Process Reliability Training. Colin Mercer Program. Underneath in smaller type it said, "Technical Support, Mara Vance and Tessa Grant." I stared at it long enough for the screen to dim. The file history showed Colin's revision at 6:12 that morning. He had also replaced my photograph beside the demonstration frame with a clean equipment shot. Tessa's smiling face was gone with mine. I walked to his office carrying my printed authorization email. He was on the phone, so I waited. His glass wall made waiting feel like standing outside a fish tank. He motioned me in, finished a conversation about lunch counts, and muted his laptop. "Good timing," he said. "I want your thoughts on adding a section for environmental services directors." I set the title page on his desk. He glanced at it. "Brand architecture. My architecture has my name under technical support. It's a company product, Mara. I understand that. Why is it a Colin Mercer program? Because clients buy confidence from a person before they buy a system from a company. It gives them an accountable face." "You weren't the instructor." "I know." Then put "developed by Mara Vance" in the manual. His gaze moved from the title page to me. He had pale brown eyes that looked warmer from a distance. "We're still in a pilot," he said. "We don't want the materials tied too tightly to one employee." "But you tied them to one employee, to the program lead. You're the sales lead, client development and training director. who didn't develop the training. He sat back. Mara, this is why I wanted you involved. You have credibility I can't fake. The sentence was nearly honest enough to disarm me. Then don't fake it. A flush climbed from his collar. He folded his hands over the paper. The board approved this because I presented a scalable product, not a personal workshop. Your contribution is substantial. I've said that in every room. Say it on the page. I'll revisit the credits after the pilot. When? After the consortium review. Put that in writing. He smiled without showing his teeth. You print all your emails, don't you? The useful ones. And annotate them. I looked down. In the top margin of my authorization email, the blue box around 16 hours was visible. My dad worked in a machine shop, I said. They marked steel before they cut it. Are you marking me before you cut me? I'm asking for an accurate credit line. For a moment, he looked more curious than offended. Then he picked up a pen and wrote on the title page, Credits finalized after consortium, pilot review. Beneath it, he added his initials and the date. Good? He asked. Better. I took the page. By the second pilot, my 16 development hours had become 12. Payroll called it a temporary allocation adjustment. Colin called it operational necessity. Our service backlog was growing, and field technicians were driving 2 counties out of their way to cover emergency calls. He asked me to keep curriculum work inside the reduced hours. I told him I could reduce the course revision or delay the next session. He looked wounded by the existence of arithmetic. We have momentum, he said. Then restore the hours. I don't control payroll by myself. Who requested the adjustment? He spun a brass letter opener between his fingers. I approved a branch-wide capacity plan. I waited. He put the letter opener down. I can find you 4 hours next week. Send me the allocation. You know, most people would appreciate the flexibility. Most people should. He sent the allocation before lunch. I started saving each version of the lesson plans in Calder's document archive, where revisions were time-stamped and couldn't be overwritten without leaving a record. On attendance sheets, I added separate lines for instructor and coordinator. The evaluation form already had an instructor field, so I made sure it stayed there when Colin sent the packet to marketing for a redesign. Marketing returned it without the field. I restored it. They removed it again, replacing it with presented by Calder Process Services. I called Dana Ruiz, the designer whose initials appeared in the file. I keep losing a line, I said. The instructor line. Yes. Colin asked us to simplify the personal fields. Facility and job title are still there. He specifically said instructor attribution creates confusion when multiple people support delivery. Did he say that in an email? Dana went quiet. I'm not trying to put you in the middle, I said. You are literally describing the middle. That's fair, she sighed. He marked it in the PDF comments. Can you keep his comments attached when you return the revision? A pause. Then, that's normal document procedure. Thank you. The instructor line returned. The second pilot was held in Calder's training room for 15 supervisors from 4 facilities. Colin opened the session, stayed through the first module, then left for a sales call. He had told me he would introduce me as course developer. Instead, he said I had helped translate field experience into today's activities. Tessa was behind the demonstration frame connecting a clear hose. Without looking up, she said, "Translated from English." 2 people laughed. Colin pretended not to hear. At lunch, I found my manual on the lectern open to the credits page. Someone had drawn a blue line through technical support and written developed and instructed. I knew the handwriting. Tessa. She bit into an apple. Must have been Dennis. Dennis isn't here. He's got reach. I wiped the marker off before Colin returned. The wax left a faint blue groove in the paper coating. Why'd you erase it? She asked. Because I'm not turning a client manual into a bathroom wall. Bathrooms are where working people tell the truth. Put that in the advanced module. That afternoon, a participant named Ray kept rushing the isolation sequence. He was an experienced maintenance manager, confident enough to treat labels as suggestions. Twice, he reached across the frame before his partner confirmed zero pressure. On the third attempt, I caught his wrist. You touch the coupling now, you take home an exciting scar. The gauge is at 0. The gauge is downstream. He looked at the diagram, then at the actual line. The upstream valve was still open. That setup's tricky, he said. The setup is ordinary. Your assumption is tricky. His mouth hardened. I let go of his wrist and handed him the blue marker. Circle where the pressure is trapped. He did. At the end of the day, he stayed after the others left. He had lost the swagger. We have that exact arrangement on our older finishing line, he said. Gauge downstream, shut off upstream. Label it. Our labels keep peeling. Then etch a tag. We don't have an engraver. Omar does. Ray gave me a suspicious look. You know everybody's equipment. I know who complains about what at lunch. He smiled. You got his number? I introduced them by email. 2 days later, Omar sent me a picture of 6 etched valve tags lined up on his workbench. Underneath, he wrote, "History is a tool. So is aluminum." The second set of evaluations averaged higher than the first. All 15 participants wrote my name in the instructor field. One spelled Vance with an S. Dana corrected it in the summary before I asked. The completion certificates arrived the following week. Colin's name appeared beneath program instructor. Mine appeared nowhere. Omar called my desk line once. His voice was as measured as ever. I received a certificate claiming Mr. Mercer instructed me. He coordinated the program. Did he teach a session while I was unconscious? No. Then the certificate is false. I'm having it corrected. Good. I walked the certificate to Colin's office. He was packing for a trade conference, arranging color-coded folders in his briefcase. Omar won't sign the completion acknowledgement. Why is Omar signing his own acknowledgement? He's the site lead. He confirms the roster and instructional hours. Colin examined the certificate. This is a template issue. The template has your name in it. It defaults to program director. It says instructor. He dropped it on the desk. Fine, change it. All 16 from Bellwether and all 15 from the second pilot. Fine. And the certificate template. His jaw shifted. I said, fine. I remained by his desk. What else? The slide deck still says a Colin Mercer program. We discussed that. You wrote that we would finalize credits after the pilot review. We're 2 sessions in. The review is after the third. Then the third session needs an accurate agenda, manual, and evaluation form. You're getting territorial. I'm getting specific. His phone lit up. He glanced at the screen, then turned it face down. Mara, I'm trying to build a division sturdy enough to employ trainers full-time. That includes you. If every conversation becomes a fight over whose name goes on which line, the board will see a personality problem instead of a growth opportunity. Whose personality? He laughed once through his nose. There it is. What? The part where you make cooperation sound like surrender. I thought of his handwritten promise in my desk drawer. Accurate attribution is cooperation, and leadership is making the work bigger than yourself. You put your name above the company's. His face went still. I left the certificate on his desk and returned to the training bay. Tessa was tightening bolts on the demonstration frame. She looked at me once and reached into her back pocket. You need this more than I do. She handed me my blue marker. I have 3. That's the good one. They're all the good one. Leon would be ashamed to hear you say that. I uncapped it. The tip had worn flat on one side. On the laminated diagram, I wrote Bellwether certificates beside a clean square and circled it. Tessa leaned against the frame. How bad? He called me territorial. That's a management word for I found the fence. I capped the marker. The next consortium email arrived before we finished packing the equipment. Helen Cho had scheduled a rehearsal for the final pilot and formal client review. Colin would lead the presentation. A new internal facilitator named Nolan Price would assist with the practical modules. My name appeared under technical support. At the bottom of the same email, our service dispatcher had added an emergency assignment, a hospital laundry in Fredericksburg, 2 hours away, reporting a steam line control failure. Departure time was 6 the next morning. The rehearsal began at 9. I drove to Fredericksburg in rain hard enough to erase the lane markers. The steam line control failure turned out to be a sticking pneumatic actuator, a soaked junction box, and 3 separate people who had each reset the same alarm without telling the others. By 8:30, I was crouched behind a finishing line with condensate dripping down my collar, while a supervisor held a flashlight 6 inches to the left of everything I needed to see. "Can you move that right?" He moved it farther left. "Your other right." "Sorry." I pulled the actuator cover and found corrosion around the terminal block. "How long has this been wet?" "It's not usually wet. Water has built a civilization in here." He bent closer. "Is that bad?" I replaced the terminal block, dried the junction box, freed the actuator, and tested the isolation twice. The line was running by 10. My phone showed 7 messages from Colin and 1 from Tessa. Colin's messages progressed from "call when available" to "we needed you here" to "this is exactly why cross-training matters." Tessa said, "Nolan keeps calling the discharge valve, the return valve. I have developed a facial twitch." I reached Calder at 11:17. The rehearsal was over. Nolan Price stood beside the demonstration frame, winding one of our clear hoses around his hand like an extension cord. He had a neat beard, a bright red Calder polo, and the alert expression of someone who had read every page but had never smelled overheated softener. "Don't do that," I said. He froze. "Do what?" "Coil it that tightly. You'll crease the hose." He unwound it immediately. "Sorry, Colin said these were replaceable." "Everything is replaceable. That doesn't make breaking it a system." He looked embarrassed, which made me soften despite myself. "Wide loops," I said. "Use the hooks under the frame." He tried again. "Tessa said you'd know how." Tessa was across the bay putting tools into her case with unnecessary force. "How did rehearsal go?" I asked. "Great," Nolan said. "Ask him where pressure gets trapped," Tessa said. Nolan glanced at the frame. "Depending on valve position?" "Promising start," she said. Colin emerged from his office carrying the revised facilitator guide. "Mara, conference room." He didn't offer me a chair. On the table, 3 printed agendas listed him as program creator and Nolan as facilitator. I appeared beside equipment support. "I assigned Nolan because the program needs delivery capacity," he said. "You were unavailable today. That validates the decision." "You assigned me to Fredericksburg." "I assigned the available technician with the right STEAM certification. Tessa has the same certification. Tessa was needed for rehearsal. So was I." He pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. "This is an operations business. Client emergencies don't pause because we're developing a course." "Then reschedule the rehearsal. Helen Cho is coming to observe the final pilot tomorrow. The consortium review is next week. I'm not moving 40 calendars because you object to a field assignment." "I object to Nolan teaching an isolation drill he can't perform." He completed the facilitator guide. He called a discharge valve a return valve. A verbal mistake. "In a live equipment sequence. The equipment is decommissioned. The chemical pump for the calibration module isn't." Colin lowered his hand. "Then supervise him." The agenda says I'm equipment support. Fine. Technical supervisor. Instructor. He gave me the patient look people use when they want impatience to appear principled. "Nolan is facilitating. You're ensuring technical integrity." That's instruction with a smaller name. "This fixation is becoming disruptive. The words keep changing because the work doesn't." His mouth flattened. "Tomorrow, Nolan leads. You intervene only if there is an actual safety or equipment risk. If you undermine him because you prefer your own delivery style, we'll have a different conversation." "Is he certified internally?" "We don't have an internal certification process. I sent you one last month. You sent me a draft. It includes a practical assessment he hasn't passed. Colin pushed an agenda toward me. Tomorrow is his practical assessment. With 15 clients in the room, they're experienced professionals participating in an established pilot. They aren't practice material. He leaned forward. Mara, if this program can only be delivered when you are personally satisfied with every variable, it has no future. The sharpest part was that he was right about one thing. A real training division could not depend on my presence forever. I wanted other instructors. I wanted standards strong enough that my name could come off a schedule without the course becoming weaker. I picked up the agenda. I'll supervise. Good. If there's risk, I take over. If there's risk, you manage it discreetly. Risk doesn't care about your tone. He sat back. The meeting was finished before either of us stood. The next morning, Helen Cho arrived 10 minutes early carrying a leather case and a stainless steel mug. She was compact, silver-haired, and dressed more like an engineer visiting a boiler room than a quality director attending a course. She read every label on the demonstration frame before introducing herself. "You made these?" she asked me, touching one of the laminated diagrams. "Yes." "The blue notation comes off?" I wiped away a circle with the felt square. Most of it. A faint blue shadow remained. "Useful," she said. "People should be able to see what they thought after they changed their minds." Colin appeared beside us. "Helen, good to see you again. Nolan is leading today's practical work. Mara's supporting technical delivery." Helen looked at me. "You taught the first two?" "I did." "And developed the material?" Colin answered. "Mara helped convert our field data into exercises." Helen's eyes stayed on mine for a second longer, then moved to Nolan. "Show me your isolation sequence." Nolan did well through the first two modules. He had studied. He asked participants questions instead of reading the slides. And when he forgot the name of a coupling, he admitted it rather than inventing one. I began to think Colin had seen something I hadn't. Then we reached chemical feed calibration. The live pump sat on a separate cart with a water reservoir and clear return line. It was small, but replacement cost more than $3,000, and a damaged diaphragm would cancel half the exercise. Nolan primed it correctly. He opened the suction valve, checked the reservoir, and asked Ray, back for the follow-up session, to confirm the return path. Ray pointed to the wrong clear hose. Nolan followed his finger. I saw his hand move toward the start switch. "Trace it," I said. He paused. Colin stood near the back wall with his arms folded. Nolan traced the hose from the pump to the manifold, but he lost it where the two lines crossed. He opened the bypass valve instead of the return. The return remained closed. "Don't start it," I said. "I have flow path." "You have bypass." He glanced at the diagram. The diagram shows the return on the right. The cart was rotated for the room. The 15 participants were watching now. Nolan's face reddened. "I know the setup," he said. He pressed start. I hit the stop before the motor completed its first cycle. The hose jumped against the cart. Water slapped the inside of the reservoir. The pump gave one hard metallic click and went silent. Nolan stepped back. "I had it." "You had a closed return." "You could have let me correct it." "After the diaphragm tore?" Colin crossed the room. "Let's take 5. Helen remained seated. She wrote something on the margin of her guide. In the storage room, Colin shut the door behind us. "I told you to manage risk discreetly." I told him twice. "You embarrassed him." "He started the pump against a closed line, and you challenged him in front of the group until he felt forced to prove himself." I stared at him. "You're blaming me for his hand?" "I'm telling you that instruction includes managing people, not just equipment." Nolan wasn't the trainee. He was being assessed. Then he failed. Colin's face changed. The warmth vanished from it, leaving something cleaner. "You seem determined to make sure no one else can do this." "I'm determined to make sure they can. On your terms. On the pump's terms." He opened the door. "Finish the module. We'll discuss your role after the review." Nolan was waiting outside. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I taught the rest of the session. He handed me the marker, stepped to the side, and took notes. By the final exercise, he was helping Gloria trace a pressure path without answering for her. When she found the trapped section, he smiled like someone who had learned something expensive without having to pay the full price. Afterward, he approached while I drained the reservoir. "You were right," he said. "I know." He blinked, then laughed despite himself. "You could make that easier." "You nearly broke my favorite pump. Company pump. I have boundaries." His smile faded. "Colin said you'd do that." "Do what?" "Treat every correction like proof the whole program belongs to you." I set down the hose. "Did he tell you who wrote the facilitator guide?" "He said it was developed internally. My initials are in the file properties." He looked toward the conference room where Colin was speaking with Helen. "I'm not trying to take your job," he said. "I'm trying to make sure you're trained for it." That landed somewhere he hadn't prepared to defend. He picked up the utility bucket and carried it to the drain. All 15 evaluations from the third pilot named me as instructor. Nolan's name appeared on 9 forms as co-facilitator. I added it to the delivery summary myself. Helen requested the original lesson plans, attendance records, facilitator revisions, and all evaluation forms. Colin sent her a polished binder with the newest versions. I sent nothing until she copied me on a follow-up. "Ms. Vance, please provide the archive pilot materials in native format, including revision history." Colin called me before I finished reading. "Send them through me," she asked me directly. "I manage the client relationship. I'll copy you. Mara." "I'll send exactly what she requested." His voice cooled. "Fine." That afternoon, my schedule changed. My 4-day field rotation became 5 standard days, which ended the weekend installation overtime I had counted on for Leon's rent increase. My remaining development hours disappeared into general service coverage. Colin described it as workload alignment. When I told Leon, he opened a drawer, took out an envelope, and pushed it toward me. "I can cover my own rent." "With what?" "Money." "You label everything except money?" I labeled the envelope. Across the front, he had written, "Mind your business" in blue marker. I pushed it back. "Keep it." "You losing sleep doesn't make my apartment cheaper." "I'll adjust." He studied me. "You think leaving means he wins." I didn't say I was leaving. "You didn't have to." Tessa stopped eating lunch in the training bay. When I asked if Colin had spoken to her, she tightened the lid on her thermos. He asked whether I can work effectively under program leadership. "What did you say?" I said I work effectively under ventilation. "Tessa, I have 9 years until I can touch my retirement account without taking a beating." The anger went out of me. "I understand." That somehow feels worse. She left with her thermos under her arm. For 3 days, the training base stayed quiet. Then I arrived to find a black binder on my workbench. Inside were setup logs for every pilot session: equipment configuration, arrival times, repairs, instructor assignments, and Tessa's neat initials at the bottom of each page. My name appeared on every practical module. Colin's appeared under opening remarks and client coordination. A sticky note on the cover said, "Ventilation improved." Omar forwarded the full email chain in which he had asked me 31 technical questions, and Colin had passed along my answers under his own signature. Dana preserved the PDF comments, removing the instructor field. Nolan sent his completed assessment with the failed calibration sequence marked in red and asked to retest under me. Skill, records, and people Colin had underestimated began arriving at my desk. I used them to write one short email. "I will not lead the live demonstration at the consortium review unless the agenda and presentation identify me as program developer and lead instructor. I remain available for field service and equipment support under my assigned role." Colin waited 6 hours. Then he agreed. At 4:13 on the morning of the review, the printer jammed on the first manual. I pulled the page free, smoothed the bent corner, and tested my father's blue China marker beside the Calder logo. It left a clean blue arc. At 8:55, I carried the manuals into the conference room. The corrected agenda was at every seat. My name appeared exactly where Colin had promised. The projected title slide said something else. Colin glanced at the wall, then at me. "Keep this professional," he said, and walked to the front. Helen kept one hand on the empty chair beside her. "Ms. Vance?" I looked at the corrected agenda lying in front of each evaluator, then at the title slide projected above Colin's shoulder, a Colin Mercer program. The manuals in my arms felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. "My assigned role is equipment support," I said. "That chair appears to be for the lead instructor." Helen looked down at the agenda. "This identifies you as program developer and lead instructor. That's the version Colin approved yesterday." Colin removed his hand from the manual under the document camera. My blue arc reappeared beside the Calder logo. "There's been a slide version error," he said. "Mara, please take the seat so we can continue. Which version is the error?" His jaw tightened. Helen closed the bound stack of evaluations. "I'd like an answer to that, too." Colin reached for the presentation remote. "The wording on the slide reflects overall program leadership. The agenda reflects delivery roles for today. We're allowing an internal credit discussion to distract from the substance of the client review." One of the hospital operations directors turned the agenda over as if expecting the other explanation on the back. Helen said, "Who wrote the troubleshooting exercises?" Mara compiled the field content. "I designed the program's market structure, client objectives, and scalable delivery model." "That isn't what I asked." "Mara wrote the exercises." "Who determined the instructional sequence?" "Mara." "Who taught the pilot sessions?" "Mara led the first two. Nolan Price facilitated portions of the third under technical supervision." From the back wall, Nolan spoke carefully. "Mara took over the chemical feed module after I failed the practical sequence." Colin turned. "That level of detail isn't necessary." "It's on my assessment," Nolan said. Helen tapped the bound evaluations. "Every participant in the third pilot named Ms. Vance as instructor. 9 also named you as co-facilitator." "That sounds accurate," Nolan said. I looked at him. He had worn the red Calder polo again, but today the company logo seemed less like a costume on him. Helen pulled out the chair another inch. I set the manuals on the table and sat. Colin returned to the front. His recovery was quick. That was part of what made him good. He changed the title slide to the first module before anyone could study it longer and began walking through the pilot results. He knew the numbers. He explained the reduction in repeat troubleshooting errors during the 30-day follow-up. He connected our isolation sequence to lost production hours and linen replacement costs. When a finance director challenged the proposed fee, Colin broke it down against the cost of one outsourced processing day and made the course sound inexpensive. For 15 minutes, he reminded everyone why Calder had hired him. Then Helen asked, "Why does your isolation procedure place physical tracing before controller diagnosis?" Colin clicked to a diagram. "We emphasize a practical, equipment-first philosophy." "What condition made that necessary?" "It's based on recurring field failures." "Which ones?" He looked toward me. I opened the manual to the marked isolation diagram. Downstream gauges were giving operators false confidence that upstream sections had depressurized. We found it in 9 failure reports across 5 facilities. In 4, the valve labels had peeled or faded from heat and chemical exposure. The controller showed the final alarm, so people treated it as the first cause. Helen nodded. "Why require verbal confirmation between partners?" "Because people rush," Colin said. Helen waited. I said, "Because the person at the disconnect often can't see the person tracing the line. The confirmation closes that gap. At Bellwether, the finishing line blocks sight between the electrical panel and the upstream valve. Omar sat 2 seats down from Helen. Also blocks hearing when line 3 is running. Which is why the partner has to repeat the equipment identifier," I added. Helen turned a page in her notes. "One more. Why does the facilitator certification require the instructor to rotate the calibration cart during assessment?" Colin's eyes moved to the screen, but that detail wasn't on a slide. Nolan answered from the wall. to make sure the facilitator traces the actual hose instead of memorizing the diagram. Helen looked at me. After the third pilot, I said. Nolan suggested it. He straightened slightly. Colin set down the remote. This is a productive demonstration of how the program has evolved under my leadership. Mara's technical depth, Nolan's facilitator feedback, my client design, Tessa's equipment work. I brought those pieces together. There it was, the version closest to truth, offered only after the other versions had failed. You did bring us together, I said. He looked surprised. You secured the pilot, you structured the follow-up, you made the cost case. Those contributions belong to you. The tension around his mouth eased a fraction. The curriculum doesn't, I continued. The instruction doesn't. Changing the labels doesn't change the work. He picked up the remote again. I have never denied that you contributed. You called me the girl who helped with slides. A few evaluators looked down at their forms. Colin's face reddened. That was an ill-phrased, informal description. In a formal client review, I was trying to avoid dragging an internal dispute in front of the consortium. You put the dispute on the title slide. Helen opened her leather case and removed a second binder. This one had a plain white cover marked Pilot Source Records. Calder supplied the native files I requested, she said. The archive identifies Ms. Vance as the original author of all 4 instructional modules. Ms. Grant's setup logs identify her as instructor for every practical exercise. The attendance records match the evaluations. Mr. Bell's correspondence establishes that technical support after the sessions came from Ms. Vance. Omar folded his hands over the table, usually before 7 in the morning. You emailed at 5:45, I said. I was awake. I wasn't. You answered. Against my better judgment. His mouth moved at one corner. Helen continued. The evaluation template was revised twice to remove the instructor field. It was restored after your marketing department retained the director's PDF comments. Colin glanced toward Dana, seated near the equipment table with a laptop. She met his look and said, "Normal document procedure." Tessa would have enjoyed that. Helen slid the source binder between Colin and me. The consortium evaluates training providers on content accuracy, delivery competence, record integrity, and continuity. Attribution affects the final 2. If the person delivering and revising the course is invisible in the provider's own documents, we cannot judge who is qualified to deliver it later. Colin pulled out a chair. For the first time that morning, he sat. This program cannot become dependent on one employee, he said. I agree, Helen replied. What have you done to prevent that? We began cross-training Nolan. Without the assessment the developer created. The assessment was a draft. Nolan lifted his completed copy. It's a pretty good draft. Colin looked at him with an expression I recognized. It was the moment he realized resistance had spread beyond the person he had prepared to manage. Helen turned to me. What are you asking the consortium to do? Nothing about my employment. That's between Calder and me. What are you asking Calder to do? Colin's attention sharpened. Correct the authorship. Identify who instructs each session. Certify facilitators before they lead client exercises. Give the program lead authority to stop or change delivery when the equipment or sequence requires it. And the title slide? Helen asked. I looked at the blue arc beneath the document camera. Put the truth on it. The review continued for another hour. We discussed pricing, follow-up data, and whether the advanced module should include STEAM systems. Colin answered the commercial questions. I answered the operational ones. Nolan took notes on the certification changes. Omar objected to the phrase optional site assessment until Colin changed it to recommended. By the end, the whiteboard held more revisions than accusations. Helen closed her binder. The consortium will issue its decision after Calder submits corrected program governance and delivery records. Colin gathered his folders with exact, quiet movements. The branch vice president, Renee Walsh, had attended by video. Her face had occupied a square in the corner of the wall screen for the entire review. She asked Colin and me to remain after the client representatives left. Omar stopped beside my chair. "New certificate," he said. "It's being corrected. Then I'll sign it." He shook my hand and left. Dana collected the evaluation copies. Nolan rolled the hoses in wide loops and hung them beneath the frame. When the door closed, Renee's voice came through the speaker. "Colin, why was the approved title slide replaced?" He stood beside the document camera. The presentation deck had not been updated to match yesterday's agenda. "The file history shows an edit at 7:12 this morning." He looked at me. I hadn't checked. I hadn't needed to. Renee said, "The archive was part of Helen's source package." Colin loosened his collar. "I believed program-level authorship belonged with the director accountable for commercial development." "Then why did you agree in writing to credit Mara?" "Because she made her participation conditional at a point when changing presenters would have jeopardized the review." I felt that sentence like cold water down my back. Even now, he could describe my boundary as leverage against him and make it sound almost reasonable. Renee turned to me. "Did you refuse assigned work?" "I refused to lead the live demonstration while being listed as equipment support. I remained available to perform equipment support." "Did you send source files to the client against Colin's direction?" "Helen requested them directly. I copied Colin on the delivery." Renee glanced down, presumably at the email. "You did?" "She asked us to submit written accounts by the end of the day. Until she reviewed them, Colin retained responsibility for client development. I retained field duties. Training materials were frozen except for factual corrections approved by both of us." Outside the conference room, Colin stopped me beside the coffee urns. "You made your point." "The slide made it for me. You could have corrected me privately." "I did, more than once. You built a case. I kept records. For the same purpose." "No, I kept records so the work stayed accurate. The case appeared when you kept changing the record." He looked older than he had that morning. The lines beside his mouth had deepened, and a small coffee stain marked his cuff. "You think I wanted to erase you," he said. "What did you want?" "I wanted the board to see a program, not a talented technician with a workshop. Calder doesn't fund talented technicians, it funds products. So you made yourself the product. I made myself accountable. You put my mistakes under my name and my work under yours." He flinched. I hadn't planned the sentence. It came from somewhere cleaner than planning. After a moment, he said, "If the program stayed yours, what happened when you left?" "You trained someone." "I did." "You handed Nolan a guide and used clients as his assessment. He needed experience. He needed preparation." Colin rubbed the coffee stain with his thumb, making it larger. "You don't understand what it costs to get a board to say yes. And you don't understand what it costs to keep their yes from hurting somebody." We stood there between the cooling coffee and the empty chairs, each of us holding the part of the business the other had learned to undervalue. Renee's review took 12 days. During those 12 days, I worked 5 standard shifts. I replaced 2 steam traps, rebuilt a chemical valve, and ate lunch alone in my truck, more often than I cared to admit. Tessa gave me space until Thursday, then climbed into the passenger seat carrying soup in 2 sealed jars. "Ventilation got lonely," she said. "You abandoned me for workplace safety." I panicked. "I know." She stared through the windshield. "I hate that you know." I opened 1 jar. "This has meat in it." "You're welcome. You're vegetarian." "I'm not eating yours." The consortium's decision arrived the following Monday. It would renew the training contract for 1 year if Calder named a qualified program lead, corrected authorship across all materials, retained instructor-specific delivery records, and implemented practical certification before independent facilitation. Renee offered me the program lead position that afternoon. The first salary number was less than I had made with installation overtime. I declined it. She came back with more money and broad language about shared responsibility. I narrowed the language. Curriculum changes required my approval or a documented technical review. Facilitator certification belonged to the training team, not sales. Tessa received 4 protected development hours a week and the title of Senior Technical Trainer. Nolan remained a facilitator candidate until he passed. I asked for compensation for the development hours I had worked after my allocation was cut. Renee offered 40 hours. My archive showed 73. We settled at 64 and restoration of the overtime I had lost after the schedule change. It covered Leon's rent increase and left enough for me to replace the tires I had been pretending would survive another winter. Colin remained through the account transition. He was excellent at it. He corrected the pricing model, transferred every client contact, and built a sales guide that made the program easier to explain without claiming he had invented it. On his last Friday, he placed a revised manual on my desk, developed by Mara Vance Practical Systems and Equipment by Mara Vance and Tessa Grant Client Program Design. By Colin Merceri read all 3 lines. "Accurate?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded once. I accepted a regional sales position with a chemical systems vendor. "Good fit." That sounded painful. "It's inconvenient. I was prepared to dislike everything you did." A tired laugh escaped him. Then he saw the blue marker beside my keyboard. "I suppose you're keeping records of this conversation. I'm considering writing 'good fit' on your exit form. Use black ink. It looks more sincere." That was the closest we came to forgiveness. Nolan passed his practical assessment 3 weeks later. Tessa rotated the calibration cart while he waited outside. When he entered, he ignored the diagram, traced every hose by hand, and identified the return line correctly. Before touching the start switch, he looked at me. Return open. Bypass closed. Flow path confirmed. Start it. The pump settled into a smooth, steady rhythm. Omar's replacement certificate arrived with my name under lead instructor and Colin's under program design. Omar signed the acknowledgement and mailed it back with a note. Ink remains uncorrected. The 46 original evaluations stayed in the training archive. Helen's bound copy remained with the consortium. Dana built a locked attribution field into the manual template and named it Mara Line, which embarrassed me enough that she promised never to say it aloud in a meeting. On the morning of my first session as program lead, I found Leon waiting outside Calder with a paper bag of breakfast sandwiches. "I was nearby," he said. "You live 28 minutes away." Nearby is relative. I showed him the new manual. He read the credits twice, rubbed his thumb over my name, and handed it back without comment. Then he reached above his ear and held out one of the old blue China markers. "I have 3, I said. "Not with this wax density." I took it. Inside, a new group of supervisors stood around the demonstration frame. Tessa checked the couplings. Nolan arranged the evaluation forms beside the door. At the top of each one, the instructor field was clear and wide. I clipped a fresh laminated diagram above the pump. The room quieted as I uncapped Leon's marker. I circled the first pressure point in blue, then wrote Mara Vance across the white space at the top. "Before we touch anything," I said, "tell me what happened before the alarm."